It is the final impact before sacrifice, and TNA had one job: make Friday feel important. Not every match needed to be a classic for this week's TNA Impact. Not every segment needed to steal the show. This was about building tension and adding a little chaos in the match and making sure the big names heading into sacrifice had some momentum. And to TNA's credit, they mostly got there. You had Mike Santana and Steve Macklin continuing to circle each other without fully exploding. You had Moose mowing through another opponent. You had the system being a problem as always all night. And somehow, because this is TNA, you also had a bloody rabbit, Buff Bagwell, talking about redemption, and another dose of Rosemary's supernatural darkness. So yeah, this was a go-home show, but this was also a very TNA go-home show, I guess, compared to WWE. So let's get to it. Welcome to the T-Drop, Strong Brew, No Soft Behavior. Tonight, we're breaking down the final impact before sacrifice. What worked, what felt like a setup, and whether this show actually did enough to get people ready for the weekend. So let's get to it. This episode felt exactly like what it was supposed to be. A bridge between the build and the payoff. The payoff being sacrifice. That doesn't always make for the most memorable TV, but it makes it important. For the most part, in this case, TNA used the night to keep its major stories moving. Even if some of the matches clearly existed more to position people than to truly surprise you. That was the tone of the whole show. For the most part, it was functional, fun, and a little strange, but mostly focused on getting to sacrifice in one piece. So we start the night with Mustafa Ali versus BDE. The show opened with Mustafa Ali beating BDE in a quick match, and honestly, BDE continues to do his job well. He gets his moments, he brings some energy into the match, he hits a few flashy spots, and then he helps make the other guy look good. That's basically his role right now, and he's filling it perfectly fine. Ali getting the win makes sense. The match moves quickly, didn't overstay its welcome, and gave Ali something to hold on to. But at the same time, it's hard to watch this and come away feeling like Ali is suddenly climbing the ladder in some major way. He got the win, but he still feels kind of stuck in the place. The bigger takeaway came after the bell when Order 4 went after Rick Swann. Trey Miguel ran in, Jada Stone got involved, and the whole thing turned into the kind of chaos TNA loves to lean into. It was a little bit of messy and effective, but because if nothing, it was still work because if nothing else, it gave the segment some life, especially at the opening of the show. So we were good. Now, before we get to the next match, there was some side story in backstage between Santana, Macklin, which is more of the real story of that night at TNA Impact. So, more than anything else, this episode was built around the tension between Mike Santana and Steve Macklin. And that was smart for the most part because that's the main event for Sacrifice. It's one of the only things on the show that actually felt like it had real heat. Santana and Leon Slater came in confident, focused, ready for both tonight's matches and tomorrow. But then Daria Ray stepped in with a warning that if Santana puts his hands on Macklin before Sacrifice, he will lose the title shot. Classic wrestling logic. Keep them apart so the anticipation builds. And throughout the night, TNA kept returning to that story in little ways. Not with some dramatic confrontation, but by making Macklin feel like a shadow hanging over everything Santana was doing. That was probably the strongest piece of the episode because it gave the show an emotional center. Now we finally move into Jeff Hardy versus Brian Myers, which was the next match of the night. Jeff Hardy defeated Brian Myers in a match that felt more like a reminder of Jeff still getting a reaction from the crowd. A reminder that the Hardys still matter to the crowd, and a reminder that the system is still hanging around the tag title picture. The problem is, though, that the system still doesn't really feel dangerous, and that's becoming an issue now. Jeff won, the pace was fast, and everything was fine for what it was, but if this was supposed to make me believe the system might be seriously shaking up the division, it didn't get there. It felt more like a quick TV match designed to keep things moving on. Afterwards, though, The system attacked again, the Righteous made the save, and that kept the tag story moving towards sacrifice. So, for the most part, the segment did its job. It just didn't exactly raise the stakes at all. We move on to the next match between Moose and Bear Bronson. One of the better surprises on the show was this match because this had no real reason to be as solid as it turned out to be. Bronson came off well here. He looked strong. His offense had weight into it, and he didn't feel like just another body being fed to Moose. He actually made the match competitive enough to pay attention, which helped Moose in the long run. For at least him, it gave some importance for. Because Moose heading into Sacrifice needed to look powerful, but he also needed to look tested. If he just ran through somebody in 2 minutes, it wouldn't have done much. Instead, Bronson gave him a fight, and Moose still found a way to put him down with the spear, which worked. The former Atlanta Falcons showing up to neutralize the system afterwards was also such a random TNA touch that I guess I have to almost respect it. It was weird, but in a harmless, entertaining kind of way that TNA does. Overall, this was some good stuff. Probably better than expected, and definitely one of the stronger parts of the night. We move on to this White Rabbit stuff. TNA took a hard left turn into the weird. Marseille gets handed a note that says, "Follow the White Rabbit." And from there, we get this eerie little backstage sequence with a bloody rabbit and someone seemingly following her from behind. I'll say this, it was memorable. I don't truly know what it means yet, and I'm not going to pretend I do. But it definitely stood out. Sometimes wrestling needs something that feels unsettling or different just to break the rhythm of the usual backstage formula. And this absolutely did that. The only concern at this point with this is the payoff. Where are we getting to with this? Because creepy visuals are fine. We've seen it all the time. We even see in WWE with the Wyatt stick. The atmosphere is fine. But eventually, this kind of stuff has to turn into something real, which again is the Bray Wyatt and the Bride 6 kind of situation at WWE. Otherwise, honestly, it just becomes a strange imagery floating in space in TNA. Still, for one segment, it did what it needed to do. It made you stop and pay attention. Now we move on after this whole thing to the Knockout Stitz women's tag match. We had a women's tag match that was fast, efficient, and built for one purpose: make Tessa Blanchard feel like the most important woman in the match. And that's exactly what happened. It wasn't some balanced showcase where everybody got equal footing. TNA clearly wanted Tessa to feel above the field here, and the booking reflected that. The pace was quick, everyone in the ring hit something, and once Tessa's team took over, the finish came after. That was the right call. No unnecessary drama or wasted emotion, just a match that moved the right person forward, at least for TNA's sake. We go next after this, though. There was a Rosemary, Crazy Steve, and the Darkness kind of thing, or at least that's the best I can explain it. We got more darkness with Rosemary and Crazy Steve. Rosemary confronts the masked figure. Steve reveals himself, and then Allie appears. Steve talks about being cast aside and left to rot. And Rosemary makes it clear that she wants something from him and is willing to pay the price. That line is the hook, because now the question becomes, what does Rosemary need badly enough to come to him for it? And we have some intrigue out of this, I guess. The segment added some good atmosphere, gave another eerie, emotional, and theatrical segment in the very specific TNA way. So that's 2 for the night at this point. But like the White Rabbit stuff, it's still in the stage where the mood is stronger than the explanation. We're interested. We just need to see how the story is going to start cashing in on that interest. So we'll see what happens. Not something probably that will be reflected in Sacrifice, but in the weeks to come after. We go next to Eric Young. He gets a match, I guess, in preparation for the next part for his story, more specifically his match in Sacrifice. But Eric Young does a beating to Brad Attitude, which was exactly what it looked like in paper. A tune-up type of match for Sacrifice. It was quick and simple. Young jumped him early, controlled most of the match, shut down the brief comeback that Brad had, and finished him off. That's all this needed to be. No complaints here from me. It was basically TNA saying, here's Eric Young. He's still dangerous. We'll see you at Sacrifice. Simple and to the point. Sometimes you need it for these type of things. We next have a Buff Bagwell involved in a different type of segment. One of the most unexpected parts of the show was Buff Bagwell. He was showing up and cutting a surprisingly human promo. He was talking about losing his leg, talking about his behavior over the years, talking about wanting to walk down the aisle and wrestle one more time. And there was some real emotion to that. And that's important because sometimes when it comes to wrestling, we need to be loud and effective. Then Frankie Kazarian came out and played the perfect heel, as always, by mocking him, taking that emotional moment and stepping all over it. Elijah comes out, makes the save afterwards, giving the segment a little bit of heart on the way out. Was it a random in the context of the overall show? Of course. But it was memorable. And sometimes that counts for a lot on the show. So much, we're going to get something set up out of this, but we will have to see. Anyway, we move on to the next thing, which, okay, I don't have a card for it. I apologize, but we'll leave it here. So before the main event, we get the Righteous getting pulled into some type of tag story. We get later on with Matt Hardy attacked and unable to compete. Santino Marella made the call to put Vincent along Jeff Hardy against the System at Sacrifice because of the attack. This was one of those storyline pivots where you can clearly see the adjustment happening in real time. But it still works well enough because the Righteous had already been hanging around this issue all night. So while it wasn't exactly subtle, it wasn't forced either. It felt like TNA taking pieces they had and making the best match they could out of the situation. Now, Dani Luna had a promo that was short and to the point. She says she's finally ready to win the knockout title. And that Sacrifice is going to be the Doomsday. That's all it needed. On a show like this, not every promo needs to be a monologue. Sometimes a clear statement with confidence behind it is more than enough. Now we get to the main event between the System versus Leon Slater and Mike Santana. Now, this main event was exactly what a go-home main event is supposed to be. It advanced multiple stories at once. You had Eddie Edwards and Cedric Alexander representing the System. You had Leon Slater bringing in the speed and Santana bringing the urgency. And you had the match laid out in a way that gave everybody a role. Slater got isolated. Santana got the comeback. The System kept stealing momentum, and the whole thing built nicely. But the most important moment, of course, was when Steve Maclin started getting involved, because that's the real story for one of the people here, Santana. Maclin choked Slater, staring Santana down, inserting himself without fully breaking the rules. Now, this was the drama that was needed in this show. It kept Santana frustrated, bringing and keeping the match personal, and reminding you that tomorrow, the next night, at Sacrifice, isn't just about who wins, it's all about who is going to lose control first. Then Eddie Edwards gets the pin, and honestly, that was the right call for that match. They needed it more than Santana and Leon Slater. If TNA wants him to stay credible anywhere near the title scene, he can't just be around. He has to feel like a threat. This win helped that. So while the match itself may not have been some all-time TV main event, it absolutely accomplished what it needed to accomplish. And on a go-home show, it becomes a very important thing. So here are my final thoughts overall about this show. Overall, this was a solid go-home episode for Impact. It wasn't the greatest go-home show ever, or something that you must see, but it was solid. It kept the important stories moving. It gave Moose a good win. It kept Santana and Maclin front and center as the most important story going into Sacrifice. It added a few strange little TNA flourishes that you obviously expect from them. And it did just enough to make Sacrifice feel like a show where something could happen. And you must go stay and watch. stay tuned and watch. That's really the key when you do these go home shows. It doesn't always have to blow you away. Sometimes it just needs to make sure that you're still interested when the next night arrives. And TNA got there. Now, the real question is whether Sacrifice will be the greatest payoff. Because if Sacrifice delivers, this episode would have done its job. But if tomorrow comes and goes without enough payoff, then this whole show is going to feel like a setup without satisfaction. And that's where I want to hear from you. Did this final impact actually get you more excited for Sacrifice, or did it feel like TNA was mostly just filing time before the real show? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you on the next video.